America. So in the teeniest, tiniest nutshell you will probably ever hear it, essentially, America happened because the early Americans felt belittled. They felt that England was not giving them the dignity and respect that they deserved as people, and they just got plain old fed up with it. Because that was their main grievance with England, it's no wonder that that was their main principle for their new country. The precept for America was the understanding that man is a dignified being who deserves and in fact has inherent right to respect and rights and liberties. To see where they're coming from with this assertion, let's glance back to Aristotle, who wrestled with the question of what a man is. Aristotle says that the essence of a man is his capacity for reason. That's what makes him different from the animals. It distinguishes him as a different kind of thing. Fast forward a few thousand years to John Locke. His whole thing was man's fundamental equality, that we are all made free and equal. And because we are human, because we are this kind of thing, we have dignities that are inherently due to us. We have rights and liberties that can't be separated from us because they are in our very nature. Because we are human, we have them, and nobody can take them away without our permission. And the Founding Fathers looked at this and they're like, yeah, that's right, that's true, and we're gonna make a government founded on it. Now at this point you might be thinking, well, if when the Founding Fathers were so big on equal rights and everything, then why was slavery a thing for so long? Because by the time the Founding Fathers started cooking up a revolution, slavery was already a very integral part of the agricultural industry. The Founding Fathers never thought slavery was a good thing. They considered it an unfortunate but necessary evil for a time. They knew it couldn't exist with a government of liberty and justice for all, so they assumed that once this new government took control, it would totally transform the political landscape so that it would just be obvious to everybody, well, duh, slavery's wrong. They fully intended for it to eventually go into extinction. Well, that didn't happen. Why? Because it was good for business, and it was easier just to let it continue on its way than to actually extricate it from society. Couple generations down the line, and people were not thinking that it was a necessary evil, but actually saying that it was a good thing. Enter Senator John C. Calhoun. How that face ever won an election, I don't know. He began arguing that slavery was right and good and great for society. But he also started saying that it was better off for the slaves to have masters because apparently they didn't have the cognitive ability to civilize themselves. Essentially, he was saying that they didn't have the natural right to liberty because he thought they were dumb. So in order to justify taking their liberty, he had to claim that they had less right to that liberty. But if you think back to Aristotle and Locke, what we were saying earlier, our humanity and our rights and liberties and dignity, they are entirely inseparable things. So to say that one person has fewer rights is to say that he's less of a human. And here's where you see the cataclysmic shift in perspective. You have a humanity of degree rather than a humanity of kind. It's the understanding that you're not a human with rights because that's just what you are. You are more or less of a human with more or less rights because of your birth, your family, your gender, fill in the blanks, whatever. And once this mindset gained momentum, the Southern politicians started insisting that the government stay out of it and let the states themselves decide whether or not to keep slavery. Enter Abraham Lincoln to smack some sense into people and remind them of their fundamental principles. That humans are equal in their humanness. That their humanness means they have rights. That these rights cannot be just taken without their consent. And he insisted, like the Founding Fathers did, that the practice of slavery was entirely inconsistent with the constitutional government and it had to go. But it wasn't just that the pro-slavery guys were denying that people had unalienable rights. It was when they wanted to let the states decide whether or not slavery was good that Lincoln kind of snapped. Because this country was founded on an absolute, unshakable, universal truth of human nature. And these politicians were saying now that it is up to the people to decide whether or not that's even true. Their government of popular sovereignty, as they like to call it, was nothing less than moral relativism, and Lincoln saw that, and he knew that that would be incredibly destructive. That is the real issue. It is the eternal struggle between these two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. They are principles that have stood face to face from the beginning of time and will ever continue to struggle. And that's sad, but really true. Because slavery is no longer an issue. Abe beat that. Thank you very much, Mr. Lincoln. But this entire problem has manifested itself again in startlingly similar but even worse colors than before. Because right now, this moment, thousands of Americans are being stripped of even the most basic human rights, and this government sanctions it. These are humans that are considered less human not because of their race or their intelligence, but because of their age, because they are very, very young. Like slavery, this problem was at first thought of as a necessary evil, and then it grew in popularity because it's an easy way out and it's easier to let just people do what they want than fix it, and now it's considered a positive good. When the proponents of slavery stood up and said, "It is the sacred right of the self-government to let people choose whether or not they want slaves," Lincoln stood up and said, "Enough. You can't legislate objective truth." But now it's a mother's sacred right of self-government, or rather, her right to choose, that lets her kill another human being? Thomas Jefferson once wrote this: "The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time." There's no gradual process in which a human life grows into its liberties or inherits its rights. There's no point at which it becomes a person. Not when it starts to move around, not at 20 weeks gestation, not once it is completely out of the mother's womb. As soon as we have life, we have the right to that life and the rights of any other human being. And this country, since the time it was a fetus, an idea in a colony that needed to be nurtured and grown, it has defended those rights. It has preserved and kept those rights safe so that we can really live. That is the only point of this government. I will conclude with another quote of Thomas Jefferson that he wrote after the Revolutionary War, when slavery was running rampant, and he was grieving and worrying for the future of his country. "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I think that God is just." The practice of abortion is the greatest injustice this country has ever seen, and possibly the world has ever seen. It is entirely contrary to our fundamental principles. It is not compatible with this government, not this government. It must end, or this country will end as we know it. Sorry, this is kind of a depressing video, but you know what? Things are bad. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.